Before we discuss what culture studies actually is, it is important to look at the word culture. What do we mean by culture? Now, as far as I'm concerned, I would say that culture is one of the most misused words and misinterpreted words in the dictionary. Because at the slightest of insults, at the slightest of offense that people take, they start trading the culture word at each other. Is this your culture? What kind of culture is this? What kind of culture do you come from? And so on. And this whole idea of cultural misunderstanding, misinterpretation and so on. So if you look at it, the fundamentals of culture, it is essentially a way of life that is agreed upon, at least in theory, by the majority of people in a group. And what is this group? This group is something that calls itself society. And how is a society formed? It is formed on the basis of some shared physical factors. It could be that people kind of share the same kind of color of skin or shape of the eyes or the texture of hair, their physical structure and so on. It could be that they share some geographical boundaries with each other. It could be that they have some common language between each other. It could be that they also share some common historical factors, like they all banded together and warded off an attack from an oppressor. That could be a common, historical factor that binds them. And why I said theoretically agreed upon by the majority of people is because no one has ever come to your door with a piece of paper and said, hello, this is our culture. Would you agree with it? That has never happened. People just assume that this is what their culture is because this is how they have always lived. This is the only way of life that they are familiar with, and therefore it is their culture. This is how they have always done something. So culture is also a matter of habit. And the most interesting feature about culture is that it is acquired. It is not inherent. You are not born with a certain sense of cultural understanding of the place that you come from. You acquire it by and by as you go along. This is why if you, let's say, take a kid from America and bring the kid to India, and it will grow up as Indian. It will have Indian beliefs. It will have Indian systems of behavior and so on. Because culture is acquired, it is not inherent. Now all of this kind of brings us to a definition by E.B. Taylor in his book Primitive Culture. It's published in 1871, and that is the definition where he mentioned some key aspects: knowledge, belief, art, morals, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by man as a member of society. There you have the word acquired again. Now look at the kind of, terminology that he uses. Knowledge, belief, art, morals, custom. See, these are some of those pillars upon which every society prides itself on standing. This is part of our custom, this is not part of our custom. This is our morality, this is terrible morality. See, that kind of repetition that you see very often, these are the pillars on which culture as well as society stands upon. And that brings me to another terminology, which is subculture. Now subculture, as the name suggests, is a smaller variation of the mainstream culture. It could be in the form of dress. It could be in the form of something like regional dialects, like you have Malayalam, which is a culture, and then, or a cultural, let's say, factor, and then you have the Thrissur version of Malayalam, you have the Trivandrum dialect, you have the Kochi dialect, you have all of these dialects which form subcultures. Slight variations it could be. In terms of the kind of, festivals that are celebrated, it might be celebrated, the same festival might be celebrated all over the state, but there will be variations in customs. That's a form of subculture. But subcultures are not very interesting. What is more interesting than subculture is something that we call counterculture. See, the majority that theoretically agreed upon a certain way of life as culture, they form the mainstream culture. So what about the others who don't subscribe to this mainstream culture, or those people who are at a disadvantage because they do not follow the mainstream culture? They are called the others. And their culture is what is called countercultures. It is very simple. See, the majority or the mainstream form the mainstream culture, and the others form countercultures. Now, by counterculture is meant the antithesis of the mainstream culture. It could be in the form of food, it could be in the form of clothing, it could be in the form of cultural habits. It could be, again, counterculture could be that which originates and grows in response or reaction to the mainstream culture. Okay? For example, you have jeans. The way people wear their jeans is an example of counterculture. It may not be very apparent at this point of time when practically everybody is in jeans, but there was a time when jeans was a symbol of defiance. Jeans was the symbol of the restless youth. Jeans was the symbol of those that did not adhere to society's form, normalizing forms of pants and coat and suit and so on, So jeans was meant for those intense, angry young people. So it's a counterculture. Now, that is why I said, you may not understand this reference to jeans, because the countercultural space is an ever-changing one. What is countercultural at this point may one day go on to become mainstream culture, and then something else will come in reaction to those things, which will then be part of the counterculture. So this is, almost like a cyclical process. Something starts as a counterculture, then becomes part of the mainstream culture. It is subsumed by the mainstream culture. And that brings me to the next question that I have to put before you. The next question that I have is why? Why is it that there is this recycling of countercultures? Now, that is basically because of what we call the culture industry. As you know, this was a term that was used by Adorno and Horkheimer in their landmark essay. And they refer to this commercialized production of goods of cultural or artistic significance. That is what they meant by culture industry. And they also pointed out a few features. They said, for the culture industry to thrive, there has to be repetition. There must be interchangeability. There must be mass production. Okay? And if you notice, every aspect of this, popular culture, there will be an opposing or an antithetical high cultural counterpart. Okay? And so you see, why there is something called the culture industry is because there is this constant search for the next big thing as far as media, entertainment, production industries are concerned, especially those production industries that manufacture consumer goods. See, that is why the items that are countercultural in nature suddenly acquire great commercial value, because they have this, cool factor. So that is why you have these interesting t-shirts that are, printed with very interesting slogans and so on. You have chains, masks, shoes, and certain kinds of music like rap have become popular, because rap was essentially like how the blues expressed the sorrows of the slaves in America. As time went on, rap began to express the anguish felt by the colored people in the various ghettos of America. But very soon what happened was that rap became so popular that it did not just express people's angst. It also expressed their ways of life. It also expressed their notions about, let's say, the life around them. It talked about relationships. It talked about politics. It talked about even things like pollution. And of course, rap did become rather sexist at one point of time. It still is, but still. So, I would say that, the culture industry, which looks to seek out that which is trending, that which can be called cool, has led to this kind of proliferation of countercultural images, which then propels them into the mainstream cultural industry. And that brings us to the one aspect of culture that almost everyone is familiar with, and that is popular culture. Popular culture is a very vibrant space that claims to be subscribed to by a vast majority of people. Okay? And popular culture is everywhere. It is in literature, in music, in films, television shows, etc. See, popular culture is let's say, the aspect that kind of is different from high culture, which is assumed to be consumed by very few elite select kind of people. Okay, high culture is meant for the connoisseur and popular culture is meant for the masses. It is like, the difference between an art film and a masala film, where the masala film represents popular culture. Now, popular culture reveals the fleeting or temporary interests of the people within a fixed set. That is also there. What is popular will not always remain popular or popular all through time. But see, popular music is an example of popular culture, definitely. But there will be a number of genre that whose popularity will come and go. Okay. Another example that I can give you is that of coffee. There is filter coffee, there is, Nescafe, so to speak, there is espresso, there is cappuccino, and then the current trend, Dalgona. And, one point of time, Facebook was full of examples of photos of people making Dalgona coffee, and now you don't see them anymore. The trend that keeps coming and going. So within a popular culture, there are also these things that we could call sub-popular cultures. Okay, and another example that I can give you is merchandise of, let's say, movie franchises like Harry Potter, Titanic, television shows like Game of Thrones, Friends, etc. But somehow, Indian television series don't really lend themselves to this kind of merchandising. I mean, you can never imagine Vanam Badi towels or coffee mugs that have, I don't watch Malayalam serials, I'm sorry. Okay, so in short, popular culture is a name that can be given to a multi-million-dollar industry that thrives on mass production and consumption. See, both of these aspects have to be there. Both mass production as well as mass consumption has to be there. Mass production needs to be there because it has to reach the same number of people at a time, in one go. It has to flood the markets. It has to be trendy. It has to be something that people want to subscribe to and they want to, nurse ambitions of owning that thing. But if they don't find it, it becomes out of reach. Then the economics of, price and demand and supply will come into equation, which will then not make it popular anymore, it will make it elite. And that is a problem. So mass production has to be there and mass consumption has to be there. Because if there is no mass consumption, then at one point, people will stop looking at it as cool or desirable. In which case, there will be large stocks of the product left unsold, leading to losses. So popular culture is a very, very momentary phenomenon, so to speak. Okay, it is, as I said before, a very vibrant space, but is also a momentary phenomenon, and there are trends and waves that come and go. Now, there are a number of inherent problems in popular culture. If you read Adorno and Horkheimer, you will know that these problems stem from the taking away of the power of labor. Okay, there is also ethical concerns that are involved because of this mass production. There are sweatshops, there are these businesses being outsourced to third world countries where people work for abysmal, very, very terrible rates of salaries. There are issues of mental health because sometimes, certain let's say symbols of popular culture, you may not be able to buy, or you may not be able to display them. Sometimes they could be, let's say, against your religion, could be against your systems of belief and tradition. So that could lead to a lot of bullying as well as social stigma. Like for example, once I remember one of the very famous clothing brands had made something called blackface, which was essentially a facial mask, but it had the red lips of supposedly African Americans. And that was very problematic, and they had to pull that from the stores. So, there could be these inherent problems, and also cultural oppression, like I mentioned, in the case of the blackface. Now, what I would like to point out is that in these elements of popular culture, be it film, music, literature, television shows, our, t-shirts, the clothes we wear, and so on, there is often history that is embedded in these products, way of life, certain systems of belief, certain, let's say, patterns of thought that are embedded in these products. And also popular culture has paved the way for the expansion of globalization. Because in order to meet this demand of novelty, in order to meet this demand of contemporaneity, people have gone on to do an extensive amount of sourcing from other countries and so on. So expansion of globalization, materials, clothing materials have come from almost all parts of the world. They are all easily available now. Designer studios and boutiques and so on are all dealing in all of these things. Then it has also paved the way for transnational cooperation. It has caused migrations, both good as well as not good. When there are rainforests being cut down, when there are, civil wars that are breaking out in the name of grabbing resources and so on, all those can also cause migration. Then it has led to knowledge generation, because it has led to a lot of studies, that I will be coming to shortly. So knowledge is being generated. There is sources of income through very, very, let's say, mobile, very fluid methods such as the internet. Then it has also helped evolve practices of trade and commerce, wireless banking networks, then a number of instruments like that have come about. And also you can see that one of the downsides of popular culture is that it has destabilized local economies. It has destabilized local languages and cultures through hegemonic practices. At one point of time, it becomes imperative to subscribe to a certain popular culture, a certain trend, a certain, let's say, mass way of life, which makes it a kind of sad, but it makes it inevitable that one lets go of one's local economies. For example, you will not go to the corner shop near your house because there is a greater variety of stuff that is available in shopping malls. Also, shopping malls are able to provide you with that complete entertainment factor. And if you suddenly feel like buying a book, it is there. If you want to buy a snack, it is there. Want to watch a movie, it is there. So see, that kind of a thing is there. So it destabilizes local economies. It makes minor languages disappear, because there is another kind of phraseology that takes over, and also cultures. Because these are what we call hegemonic practices. Hegemonic practices mean those majoritarian, dominant practices, which you have to adopt or be left out or be isolated. So you kind of subscribe to that. You also subscribe to that because of various economic, political and social reasons. Take for example the proliferation of English medium schools. I think that would be a very good example to look at the way that hegemonic practices work. And also it has become imperative in every house to have products, electronic products that reduce the kind of work that is being done in the houses. But though I don't object to that, what I'm saying is that it kind of takes away a certain kind of community life where people got together and participated in a number of, let's say, situations, number of practices, getting together to thresh the grain and so on. And our society has become such an insular society that it is seen as desirable if we can live without that chain of communication that exists between people. So that is why. That brings us to the last part of this presentation. Why cultural studies? If you think about it, cultural studies became relevant on account of postmodern movements in art, architecture, literature, etc. Because some of the features of postmodernism, the breaking down of distinctions between high art and low art, the fractures in narrative style, the experiments with form, structure, color, etc. enabled polyphony. It allowed the admission of a number of voices, and these voices were vibrant, they were energetic, they were innovative. There was a great deal of invention that was happening. So given the circumstances, there was a great deal of diversity, which I call polyphony. And there was also a growing interest in behavioral sciences because the rise of capitalism made it important to bring about a greater cooperation between art, entertainment, commerce and psychology. That's what I meant by behavioral sciences. Because capitalism, the rise of capitalism had led to such levels of mass production that it was important to know what people want. It was important to make production a targeted exercise. Okay, because profit was what was supreme in a capitalist economy. So the primacy of profit made it important that culture, which was by then a product, it was marketed and sold in a targeted fashion. So it was important to go beyond market analysis. Market analysis is an exercise that is purely commercial in nature. It is business oriented. It is numbers oriented. It was important to go beyond market analysis and understand why people behave the way they do. Why is it that they accept or welcome some things and reject some other things? When such kind of behavioral sciences analysis is done, what becomes very apparent is a taste of the people, the way that their culture has helped them orient themselves towards welcoming certain projects and rejecting or being repelled by certain others. These analysis is what helps films that were seen as terrible flops in their times. Such analysis helps them come back as cult classics, because like I have always told you, culture is something that is being constantly recycled, that goes through a period of generation, then it goes to a period of peak, then it kind of declines, it disappears, then again it comes back, and that we call nostalgia value. Like how you see in the umbrellas that young people carry around these days, the one with the handle, which was something that old people in Kerala used to carry instead of a walking stick, But now there are young people carrying it. There are various clothing trends that have come back. There are certain kinds of music that have come back. And, if you think about it, at least in Kerala, there is this great proliferation of chaya kadas or tea stalls with these names like, chaya and vada. That is about it. Now, why are these things happening? It is because there is a gradual, cultural rejuvenation that is happening. I don't mean the cultural rejuvenation in terms of the high Malayali culture or anything. No, I'm talking about how people now want to sit around and form those micro levels of communities with each other. And once upon a time in Kerala, these tea shops were the center of such discussions, of such meetings, of such gatherings of young people who discuss their ideas and so on. There were also middle-aged and old people who discussed their ideas, I agree, but there were more of young people. Okay, so this kind of a trend keeps cycling over and over back again. And so these are the basic aspects that one needs to look into in terms of culture studies. The most important thing, what is culture? And from there you come to, the ideas of subcultures and countercultures. And, you also look at why countercultures have a great deal of value as far as culture studies are concerned, and then you come to popular culture, which wherein lies the majority of, let's say, interest as far as the culture studies is concerned, and last, it makes sense altogether. I hope it was a useful lecture. Thank you.